All right, why don't we get started here? First things first, we're going to go back to our sourdough. This is our sourdough starter. I had fed this yesterday, and you can see it's growing. It's doing really well. I've got 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water here. Mix that together a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of this mixture, which is full of wild yeast growing, and put it in with my flour and water to feed. And this will grow overnight, and we will feed this again tomorrow. Now today we're going to be making ciabatta, and ciabatta is a very wet dough. It's so wet that when we go to actually shape it, we can't really shape it. We have to just sort of coax it into position. And because it's so wet, today I'm not going to throw away my extra sourdough starter. My extra sourdough starter here that I would normally throw away, I'm just going to toss it right in with my dough. Why not? It has yeast in it, and it's already mixed at 100% hydration. It's not a lot. If it were a lot, I would have to make some adjustments to the salt in our recipe because this doesn't have any salt in it. But because it's a small amount, I can usually make that adjustment just fine. This is our pouliche. On the recipe for ciabatta, it calls for a pouliche, 91 grams of flour, 91 grams of water, and a pinch of yeast. It says 0 on the recipe because it's so small. It's just a pinch, and overnight it grew quite a bit. I'm going to take this container here and put it on my scale. I'm going to measure out my water in with my pouliche since I want to get that mixed together. Anyway, I'm going to need 200 grams of water. All right, just a little bit too much. There we go, 200 grams. Now, put my scale aside. We're going to go ahead and mix these two together. Mix the pouliche and the water together to kind of help dissolve the pouliche a little bit. This is a great deal of the yeast that's going into this recipe. This recipe only calls for 3 grams of yeast in the final dough. So it's really not that much yeast. Most of the yeast growth is occurring here in this pouliche. Now, of course, I've also added my leftover sour into this. So the leftover sour is going to have some natural yeast in it. It's also going to have some good flavor. In this main bowl from final dough, I've got flour, I've got salt, and I've got 3 grams of yeast ready to go. This also calls for a small amount of olive oil. So we're going to pour that olive oil in, and we're going to pour in our liquid. In this case, the pouliche. And this is all going to get mixed together. And you will see how liquid this dough really is. I'm not even going to turn this out onto the board. I'm going to mix this in the bowl alone. Unlike other doughs like baguette dough, which is about 66% hydration, which means that the water is about 66% of flour weight. This dough is much higher in hydration. It's about 82% hydration. And that makes it very wet. As you can see, it's very wet. So we're going to mix it somewhat here with a spatula, but for the most part, we're going to rely on time to do the work with this dough. This recipe calls for combine and mix, gradually add the rest of the water. Bulk ferment 20 minutes in a covered tub, then fold it. And then we bulk ferment 20 more minutes, then fold it. So we're going to have 2 folds in here. And the folds are going to help add a lot of strength to this dough. So what's the real big difference between this and baguette dough? really not very much. If you think about it, baguette dough, the only difference is the amount of water. If you take baguette dough at 66% hydration and you bump that hydration up 20%, you will get a dough very similar to ciabatta. Ciabatta is an Italian bread. It means slipper. So it's meant to, well, they say it looks like a slipper. They're long, flat loaves, and ciabatta is very commonly cut horizontally. So then you make sandwiches out of it, or you can take chunks of cut ciabatta and put them on a grill and put grill marks on them. And they make a really great base for bruschetta and other condiments. So I'd say that's enough mixing. That's not that much mixing. We're going to rely heavily on our folds to do the rest of the work for this. This dough is just coming together. It's still pretty lumpy and shaggy, but as we fold it, as I say, it will start getting smoother. It'll start getting more elastic, and it'll start looking a lot nicer. So why don't we come back in 20 minutes, and we'll take a look at this dough and give it a fold. I've got a container of water here ready because my hands are going to need to be wet for this one. But we'll return in 20 minutes. 20 minutes have gone by and it's time to fold. Wet the hands. As I said, this dough is really wet, so wet the hands, pull it up, stretch, and fold. Wet the hands again, pull it up, stretch and fold. As we've done before, all four directions. Okay, so we're going to come back in 20 minutes for another fold. Okay, back for another fold. This is growing pretty nicely. I'm going to wet my hands. And give it a pull up and fold over. Re-wet the hands. Pull it up and fold it over. To the side, pull it up. Fold it over. Okay, this is going to need a 10-minute rest. Then we'll be ready to work with this dough and get it ready for proofing. Okay, so we're back, and we're going to be shaping this dough now. This dough is very wet, so we're going to put down a healthy amount of flour. Lots of flour on the bench. I'm going to wet my hands to help scoop it out of the bowl. We don't want to pull the dough. We just want to scoop it out of the bowl, try to retain as much air in this dough as we can. Okay, some more flour. Put plenty of flour on top. This flour is going to help you handle the dough and to cut the dough. And all we're going to do, we're not going to try to really shape this. We're going to just try to cut it into two pieces and coax it into position. And we're going to put it on a well-floured sheet pan with paper. That's going to help it stay intact and not stick to the pan. So pull away, cut down and pull away, cut down and pull away. And you do that fairly quick because it's really sticky. So a little more flour. And we're going to carefully lift these loaves and transfer them over to the sheet pan. as you can see, we've just placed them on a nice bed of flour so they bake correctly. Now this type of dough likes steam, so I've already put a saucepan in the oven with some water. The oven is going at 450 degrees, and that steam created by the pot of water will help to allow this dough to kick and spring in the oven. Here's the ciabatta, fresh out of the oven. Came out really nice. And if you're not interested in having this much flour on it, of course you can take a brush and brush off excess, but these will soften up. They're a little crusty at the moment, but as they cool, they will soften up. As they are when they're cooling, a lot of steam is escaping through the micro pores that are in the surface, and that will soften up the outer crust. These make great sandwiches, but you can also cut them, as I say, for bruschetta, and they should have a nice open interior. Go ahead and prepare yourself some ciabatta, post your pictures. I'm sure everybody will be glad to see how you did and how things came out, but I'm very happy with these. So that is day 9 of doing ciabatta and our sourdough feed. I will see you tomorrow, and we're doing focaccia on day 10. So see you soon.